Hello and welcome to the Telltale Cake, where we tell tales with cake and we try to ignore all the corpses under the floorboards. I'm your host, Beth. With me today is my dear friend, Duke. Welcome, Your Grace. He is a sushi chef, a chainmail maker, and he has also given me some of the most applicable advice in life that I have ever received, to wit. If you can't tell what it is, try licking it. This has never led me astray. So, Duke, Your Grace, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. I'm enjoying the morning. The tea is excellent, and your company, as always, is sterling. So, I can't really say that there's a I can't really say that there is a better way that I would have spent my morning.
Aw, that's so sweet. I'm honored. So, what are we reading, and why are we reading it?
Well, we're going to be reading Terry Pratchett's Hogfather, which is one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book. It was introduced to me by a girlfriend in college. She basically saw my attitudes and was like, "You'll enjoy this ridiculous humor." And she was correct. She was always correct about everything. But she was especially correct about this.
So, you are the third person amongst my friends who has independently chosen a Terry Pratchett book to talk about with me. What is it about Terry Pratchett that really appeals, at least to our generation?
Well, I think that part of it is that Terry Pratchett doesn't shy away from confronting things. In the Vimes novels, he talks about the power of legacy, the power of money. But he also talks about things in other books about, technology and moving forward, ideas that people talk about. Hogfather itself is specifically about belief. But the other thing about Terry Pratchett's novels, which especially Discworld, which I find so wonderful, is that they have several different ways that you can read them. You can read them at the surface level where they're just funny things going on, lots of fantasy, or you can take multiple deeper dives. You can start looking at the themes of the book. This one is belief and faith. Then you can start looking at the interconnected themes throughout the books. So they can be as shallow or as deep as you can go. So I think that appeals quite a bit.
There's a lot there, and they're funny. They're fun to read.
Oh,
and
God, yes.
What I liked about this one on a reread was how optimistic it is. I mean, yes, there's a lot of terrible things, especially about Christmas, that we'll get into, but Death believes in us. He believes in us as people. And if Death believes in us, and Death runs in all of our families.
It does.
Then we can accomplish things.
It runs in all of our families, beside our families, after our families, before our families, and it's just everywhere.
Death is always a part of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on this show, we eat cake with our books.
Oh, delicious.
And today we are eating soul cakes. So one of the characters in this book is the soul cake duck, who shows up and lays eggs, which is much more logical than the Easter bunny, as they point out, because Easter bunnies lay eggs, and that's weird. Bunnies generally not known for laying eggs. Ducks, however, do lay eggs, which you can buy and eat, and they're delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Not really more expensive than chicken eggs at this point in the economy.
Now, no.
So buy some duck eggs. Don't spend any more money than you would on chicken eggs. They're great. And soul cakes are something that are traditionally made in England. So I followed a traditional soul cake recipe as close as I could, although all the recipes I found called for mixed spices, which I don't know what that is. So I just mixed some cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg and stuff.
From what I understand, mixed spices is kind of like a code word for for basically just local spice mixes. So whatever you traditionally put in there, you put in there. It's basically just kind of a weasel word saying like, "Oh yes, what you like." But these look lovely.
That works, and these are traditionally made in the form of circles with little crosses cut out, but because these are soul cakes for the soul cake duck, I pulled out my ducky cookie cutter, because obviously I have one of those, and I made soul cake ducks. And I dusted them with powdered sugar to make them look a little nicer.
I have to be honest, I thought soul cakes were some sort of Terry Pratchett nonsense that he made up, because he makes up a lot of nonsense.
He does. I actually looked this up, though, and soul cakes are real.
I'm entirely happy with that. I mean, I'm always down for another kind of cake. Those are delicious.
They're a lot like snickerdoodles, I think,
That's true.
which is not a complaint.
No. I actually love snickerdoodles and other very simple forms of cake and pastry and cookies. I used to run a bakery. But my idea on it is this. If you can make something wonderful that everybody loves with simple ingredients, you have elevated something farther than you could do with a multitude of, very advanced ingredients, because you've built something with the basics rather than like 100 different specialized items. So if you can make a good snickerdoodle, you're a good baker.
I agree. And these are basically butter, flour, sugar, some spices, some currants. The traditional recipe called for raisins, but I don't really like those, so I put in dried currants instead. I don't know what it is about raisins. The only form of grape that I like preserved is wine.
To be fair, yes. Also, I had no idea currants and grapes were different things.
Now that you say that, I'm not totally sure they are, but I'm going to believe that they are. I think they are.
Oh, that tea's delightful.
Good. I like making it directly from the dried calyxes like that. It gives it a really good flavor. You can also make a really good wine out of dried hibiscus blossoms.
You have mentioned hibiscus wine before. I don't think I've ever tried it.
I need to make some. I can make wine in a bucket. It will not make you go blind. Really. Probably.
Definitely. It's fine.
Yeah. What could go wrong? All right. So, Hogfather. Let's judge this book by its cover.
Oh, that's the thing about Terry Pratchett novels. They all have awful covers, and I hate saying that.
I know.
But the covers look terrible. I mean, like, the only really redeeming part of this is that it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's Terry Pratchett, it's Hogfather, and then it gives you a picture of the Hogfather, which, visually it's a little interesting. It's Santa with tusks. That's nice, but like on a bright orange cover, it's just... Sorry, I put it down.
Yeah.
It's a bright orange
I'll
cover.
have a
It's
picture
just
up
kind of...
on it. It's
What are you supposed to do with this? I don't know.
There's worse covers, though. This has gone through several printings. Most of the older Terry Pratchett novels have Josh Kirby covers. I don't like those covers.
Are those the ones that look faded out even when they're brand new?
Yes.
Yeah, those are god-awful.
I don't know why Terry Pratchett cannot get good cover art.
From what I understand, cover art is actually done by the, I forget the word for it, but...
Publisher?
The publisher. Thank you, Beth. It's done by the publisher.
I know words.
Yeah. I do too. They're just over here somewhere. But from what I understand, that's all handled by the publisher. So Terry Pratchett probably had nothing to do with that. That being said,
it's still bad. Like, if I didn't know Terry Pratchett and somebody loaned me a copy of The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents when I was a teenager, which I highly recommend.
It's a good one.
It's great. So I knew who Terry Pratchett was, but if I were picking books of cover art, which I frequently do, because I judge books by their covers, I would probably not pick this one up.
Yeah, I have to admit, if I saw this in a store, I would pick it up, look at Santa, look at the candy cane sites, and be like, nah. Okay.
So the cover's bad. But with that in mind, let's get into it. A lot of times we talk through the plot, but in this case, I just want to summarize the plot at the beginning so we can all sit with this for a moment. So, people are trying to kill Santa Claus using the power of the Tooth Fairy.
That's an actual thing.
That's the plot.
It's not a joke.
It's a joke, but it's also not a joke. So this is the world of Discworld. We're in Ankh-Morpork, which is the giant megalopolis place city where most of the characters live. It's Hog's Watch Night, which is his equivalent of Christmas Eve. The Hogfather is Santa. The only real difference is that he's got giant pigs pulling his magical flying sleigh, which doesn't make any less sense than reindeer.
No, I actually think it makes more sense. I mean, you can feed pigs on anything. Reindeer are notoriously picky.
Also, I like pigs, at least to eat. I've never tried reindeer. I'm not sure if I'd like them as much.
Very gamey. Well, I've had deer, elk, and I'm not sure what that last one was, but I assume they're pretty similar. They're four-legged ungulates.
I will say pigs are a lot scarier than deer.
That is true. That is true. Pigs will eat anything, and I mean anything.
Including bodies?
Yeah.
If you need to get rid of the corpses under the floorboards, which are definitely not there.
Definitely.
Pigs.
It's a way.
Fast, efficient, sustainable, ecologically friendly.
All of those except for fast. Pigs take their time eating.
Oh, I don't want to watch
this. They
this.
leave bits everywhere.
Okay, maybe don't watch it, but maybe. That sounds gross. All right, so Santa Claus has been kidnapped, missing in action.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, we have these creatures, supernatural being entity things called the Auditors, which are sort of like, I don't know, supernatural bureaucrat.
They run reality. They make sure that all the bits and bobs keep spinning. The idea between the books is that they make sure that the atoms come together. They work on how to phrase this, the background physics of reality. They don't like things that are messy. And humans, there's nothing messier. So they are very much not a fan of us. And anything that they can do to make us less messy, they want to do. Which is why they want to kill Santa. The Hogfather. They want to kill the Hogfather. Definitely not Santa.
For reasons of copyright, probably.
Of course. Who holds the copyright to Santa?
Probably Coca-Cola.
Probably. They hold every other thing. Them or Disney. Please don't sue us.
We have no money.
That's true. So basically, the Auditors want humanity to be less messy. And they find beliefs, gods, all the sorts of weird things that we attach ourselves to, very messy and frivolous. So they go to the Assassin's Guild, which of course Ankh-Morpork has.
Where else would you go if you want someone to die?
Exactly. And they get a contract taken out to inhume the Fat Man, as they put it, which I love. Surface funny that we were talking about earlier. And the Assassin's Guild goes along with it because money. And they get Mr. Tea Time, who is...
Mr. Teatime?
Teatame. But I'm going to call him Tea Time because I don't like him.
No one likes him. He's one of the most genuinely frightening villains in the Discworld.
Oh my gosh, yes. Horribly terrifying. The first time I read this, I was like, oh, I can actually see this person's mind being applied to actual people in power. That's terrifying.
He doesn't like things that are unnecessary.
No, and things that are unnecessary include witnesses.
And sometimes just people who can't do things for him anymore. So Mr. Tea Time decides to use the power of the Tooth Fairy, because the Tooth Fairy, as we'll get there, has all these bits of humans, which is a good point. Why do we just give bits of ourselves to fairies? It's a really bad plan.
Oh, yeah. Fairies, notorious tricksters, and magic notoriously needs bits of other people to cast spells on people. So, of course, we're just giving our bits away for nickels and dimes and dollars, as it were. But that's actually a core premise of the book. The Tooth Fairy. Do we want to talk about that a little later, or do we want to talk about it now?
We'll probably talk about it a little later.
We'll talk about it a little later. We'll come back to that. Stick a pin in it.
What's the corporate speak? Are we going to circle back to it?
That's one of the ones I hear a lot, yeah.
Circle back. So, the Hogfather has disappeared. But wait, all is not lost for Hog's Watch Night. Another production of humanity's beliefs, an anthropomorphic personification of humanity's messiness and untidiness. One of my very favorite people in the Discworld, death.
To be clear, death has always been there, but our belief has shaped him into what he is now.
You know,
which is
skinny
the
guy.
Grim Reaper, all bones, the Scythe, the whole 9 yards. He lives in a realm that's all black and gray and white because that's what we believe death does. However, death is a gentle soul, which is utterly bizarre in the idea of death because death is either usually presented as something that is either entirely impersonal or just waiting for his chance. And this death is inevitable, inexorable, unrelenting, but kind. Doesn't do it out of malice or anything like that. He sees it as his duty to give a fitting end to all things. And I think that's kind of beautiful.
It is.
It's a wonderful way to not necessarily write a hero. I don't know the proper terms. He's not an antagonist. He's not a protagonist. Is he a protagonist?
There are some books where he's the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure he's the protagonist here. He's definitely main character-ish.
He's more Gandalf in this role than Frodo.
Yes. But he's more present than Gandalf.
Much more.
And a bit less of a Deus Ex. Well, he's a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina.
Can you get much more Deus Ex Machina than death?
Well, he does have things that he can't do and places that he can't go.
That's very true.
So and because of that, one of the places he cannot go is the Castle of the Tooth Fairy, because as we'll get to, it's a place for children. And children don't really conceive of death. It's actually one of the conceptual leaps children have to make.
Right. People and things just go away.
Yeah.
Which is why they don't understand death, or at least they don't until later, which is why there's no death in the Tooth Fairy's realm, which is very interesting and slightly horrifying.
The absence of death is actually somewhat more horrifying than the presence of death, in my opinion.
Agreed. There are some things that should end.
Yes. As we learned from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Fair.
In many ways. So death is going to try to stopgap, keep the belief flowing. And so he's going to do this by getting the Hogfather's sleigh and his 4 pigs that everyone knows the names of from their childhood. And he puts on a fake stomach and a beard, and he takes his butler and he goes off to do the Hogfather thing.
Yep.
Which he has a great deal of fun with. Death likes humans, which is one of the funnier things about him, I think.
Yes.
He loves humans. He's very interested by us.
He doesn't understand humanity.
He tries.
He tries so hard, and it's so wonderful. But at one point, he tries to give someone a Hogwatch card, and he's like, there's supposed to be snow and robins on it, and he hands them a card that's wet with, like, robins' feathers on it, and they're like, what? He's like, the snow melted and the robin wouldn't stay on. I don't understand. They wouldn't capitulate. And the person's just like, thank you.
He tried so hard.
He tries so hard.
You've got to love it and give him some
course.
credit for how hard he tries.
Of course.
So in his Hogwatch rounds, as he's going around and going down people's chimneys and leaving things in people's stockings and eating the pork pies that they leave out and drinking the sherry, he runs into his granddaughter, Susan, who is trying so hard to be normal. So hard. Death runs in her family. It runs in all of our families, obviously.
Some a little more than others, yeah.
She is Death's granddaughter. She can walk through doors. She can talk in all capital letters, which is Death's thing. Her hair always obeys her. She can see things that are going to happen. But she's trying to be normal. Mm-hmm. She's a governess, damn it. She's a good governess.
She is. Arguably the best governess.
She, in fact, identifies herself in the book as the inner babysitter. And she does a great job. We meet her. She is going to defeat the monster in the closet with a poker.
Mm-hmm. I think the first time we see this, she's going after the one in the cellar.
Oh, the one in the cellar.
And no. She does go after the one in the closet. She goes after the one under the bed, all at certain points in the books. But I think the first time we see her going after the one in the cellar. And she's going down there, and the parents who have hired her see her, and they think it's all an act. They're like, oh, it's very psychological. Go down there, whack the poker around, tell the child it's all right. And Susan's like, hey, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. She goes down there, you hear screaming, banging. She comes up, poker's bent. Like, how'd you bend the poker? It's iron.
It's all psychological.
Yeah, and then she drags a monster out of the cellar. It's like I said, it's a very funny book.
She gets very angry when she meets Death doing the Hog's Watch thing.
She does. She believes in roles and specific sets. And also, she doesn't hate her grandfather, but they have a complicated history because, after all, he is Death and her parents are dead. So it's kind of his fault. Not really, but...
It is complicated, though.
Yeah.
I will say, I would find having Death in the family to be less complicated than, like, a racist
Agreed.
ancestor, which we all have and we've all experienced.
Agreed. Oof, a racist death. That's...
No, Death by his very nature is not racist or sexist or anything. Death comes for us all.
Mm-hmm.
And death is going to be death.
Very true.
He might come for some of us more than others as results of choices we made, but frankly, those aren't Death's fault.
That's true. Those are our choices.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what happens is Death knows Susan, and Susan doesn't like being told what to do. However, if Death leaves a bunch of little breadcrumbs, Susan's going to go looking into things, especially since something's wrong, like Death wearing a fake beard and wearing a red outfit and going, ho, 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 in all caps.
He's working on the hose and the jolliness. So Death drops some hints, and then he goes off to be a department store Santa, which is hilarious.
Oh, yes.
It's one of my favorite things. It doesn't really move the plot at all. It's just there for us all to enjoy.
It's one of my favorite scenes, though, because it has Nobby Knobs. It has a little girl. I forget the name of the very religious watchman. So one of the other...
It's the really long name.
Yeah, something, but it's actually an intersection of two of my favorite storylines of his. One is the Death series and one is the Watch, and the Watch is like the Watchman. And Nobby Knobs is just considered the ugliest human on the face of the planet. He has paperwork to prove he is human. No one else has these.
And we learned that as a child, he never got anything in his Hog's Watch stocking.
I think Death gives him a crossbow.
That's what he wants. He was a good boy.
Have you been a good boy this year? But the reason the Watch was called is that Death was giving away all of these presents in the department store, which the department store is very mad about because people are supposed to buy the presents, not have Santa give them away. That is not the meaning of Hogwatch at all.
Not at all. Except for the part where it is, and he's providing them out of his magic bag.
There's also a part in the scene where a little girl asks for, I think it's a dolly, and Death is like, is that what you really want? She goes, no, I want a sword. And he gives it to her. And they go, you can't give her that. And he goes, why not? It's educational. And they go, she might hurt herself. And he goes, that will be a very important lesson.
It is.
It's just beautiful.
It's a great lesson.
It is. It's wonderful.
I think all small children should have weapons.
I don't know about that one.
In martial arts class with supervision.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. I can get behind that one. I just thought you meant like running around the street, like all of a sudden I'm going to run into a seven-year-old with a switchblade.
No, I was thinking more like a 7-year-old with a halberd.
Oh, yeah, that'd be hilarious.
Because they just fall over with it.
Definitely.
Give them non-age appropriate weapons.
Of course, of course. Something with range, though.
Yeah, he gives it. It's educational. Susan, meanwhile, is going to go try to find the Hogfather. Now, she, like everyone else who's been a child, knows where the Hogfather lives. He lives in a castle off in someplace snowy. Definitely not the North Pole, because it's not Santa Claus. And she gets Death's horse, who can go anywhere. Death obviously has a white horse for reasons of religion. For reasons of death being death, the white horse is named Binky. Very great horse. We all love Binky.
Yeah, Binky's the best.
So Binky takes her to the Hogfather's castle, along with the death of rats and his friend the Raven, because apparently rats have their own death.
There's reasons for that I can't remember.
They're not important.
No.
They're just there. They're very fun. The Raven and the death of rats are just there to add some advice, some flavor.
They're basically a foil for Susan to bounce stuff off of because she can't keep having all of this in her head. Plus, it's outside perspectives.
Yeah, it's poor writing to just have her do this by herself.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got the two little tiny Disney companions. Yeah, like, you know how all Disney heroines have the two tiny animated companions? These are hers.
Except for one just talks about wanting to eat eyeballs.
He's a raven. What do you expect?
No, it's perfect. I love it.
And the other one just says squeak in capital letters.
That's true.
So she gets to the castle of the Hogfather, and she doesn't find the Hogfather. And the castle collapses. But what she does find is the, oh God, of hangovers.
That's true. The reason that both the castle collapsed and the oh God is now there, before that night, there was no oh God of hangovers. And the reason that the castle collapsed is because belief in the Hogfather started to wane, and therefore his power waned. Also, that power had to go somewhere, because it's like water in the sea. Just because it's not in this place doesn't mean that the water's disappeared. It's just sloshing over into a new vessel. Yeah, I guess that's accurate.
That's a pretty good way to describe it.
And the vessel that got filled, or one of the vessels that got filled, is Bilious, the oh God of hangovers.
Have we ever prayed to the oh God of hangovers?
More than once. Oh God, why can't this hangover end?
Oh God.
So the idea of him is that all hangovers go to him.
And we all kind of believe in an oh God of hangovers, like these things that are being created. Well,
exactly.
We don't know they're things quite yet. But if there's spare belief, it has to create something that we believe in. Like, we all cry out to the oh God of hangovers. Mm-hmm. Susan's very confused, though. She doesn't know all this yet. So she's going to go to what she considers the logical place to find answers, which I guess, sure, which is the Unseen University. Let's talk about the Unseen University in Park. Tell me about the kind of people there.
Well, I want to say they're like academics everywhere, in some ways. They are there to give the knowledge to the next generation. In theory, in reality, what they're there for is to have lots of feasts and take up cushy jobs. Now, that could be seen as what academics used to do. Academics today, not so much. It's not so much an elite position nowadays. But in Discworld, these people are like the cream of the crop of society, and their knowledge translates into actual power, actual literal power.
They're wizards.
Yeah, they're wizards, because that is the highest form of everything. Now, these people are also making like new spells and different machines and other sorts of things like that, but they do it in the most weird, random ways possible. And that is the university. They also are have younger academicals, I guess,
who actually do work. Like they built a computer.
That's what I was going to go with. God, I'm trying to remember the lines that the computer spits out.
Oh,
Error, melon error,
out of cheese error.
out of cheese error.
That is my favorite.
If you take the ants away, it gets mad.
It also acquires a fuzzy teddy bear that it just has to have.
Yes. Well, you have to run it with the FTB on.
Right. You can't take the fuzzy teddy bear away. As a computer professional, I love the computer. Hex. It has a name.
That's right, it does. I'd forgotten that.
There's things that they attach to Hex that they're not really sure why it works, but it does. And Hex is very temperamental, but threatening it works. Like if you threaten it with a hammer, it will get more helpful. Which, again, as a computer professional, I could only wish.
Right.
So Susan arrives at this this web of incompetent, overfed
That is the exact way to describe
fools.
them. They're very smart. They're so smart, in fact, that they've circled all the way back around to stupid.
But they're having their own problems with things appearing, like the Veruca gnome. And they keep hearing these little gling, 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 gling noises. And a Veruca, just so we're all clear, because I had to look this up, is like a kind of wart thing.
My understanding that it was like a wart or foot fungus or something like. It's nasty stuff that goes on between your toes.
But apparently one of the wizards had his father tell him that if he ever walked barefoot in a bathroom, the Veruca gnome would visit him. Et voila, there's a Veruca gnome suddenly. They're saying things like you would do in a particularly incompetent D&D campaign. Like, what if there was an eater of socks? Which suddenly there's an eater of socks, and there's a bird that eats pencils.
Yep. I don't remember much about that scene other than they just keep saying things and stuff keep happening, and the bells. It just keeps going. Well, what if... No, stop believing in things.
Susan finds them less than super helpful, though she tries. They do manage to cure Bilius's hangover because they are the Wizards of Unseen University. All they do is eat and drink.
Not cure. They shunt it from Bilius to Discworld's version of Dionysus.
The god of drinking.
Who's never had a hangover, which I thought was just perfect.
Yes. So Bilius is suddenly not hungover, and he can think, and he remembers something. He remembers teeth. And this makes Susan start thinking about, what do these tooth fairies do? Like, because there's a bunch of tooth fairies. So it's not just a tooth fairy they know about. It's a whole operation. It's a good, well-paying job. If you're a tooth fairy, you pay some money, you get a ladder, you get a subscription list, you go collect teeth, you leave money, you put the teeth on a collection wagon that comes around. It's very well organized.
It's like a franchise operation. It's apparently well paid.
Nobody ever questions where the teeth go.
Or where the money comes from.
And nobody thinks to question why they're not thinking to question.
Very true.
But Susan thinks to question. And she happens to know a tooth fairy named Violet that she hasn't seen around. So she decides to go ask Violet about the teeth because she thinks the teeth are connected somehow. Because that's something Bilius remembers. So she goes, threatens a barman at a place for monsters, finds an address, walks into Violet's place, finds evidence of foul play.
I don't remember that part of the book too well, besides the broad strokes that you just covered. However, Mr. Tiatame at this point has kidnapped Violet, I believe. Yes. And gotten on the tooth wagon, which is a literal thing. I'm not I'm not making this up.
There's a tooth wagon.
Basically, there's a guy named Ernie. He goes around, collects all the teeth from the tooth fairies, and then drives the wagon to the Tooth Fairy's castle. Capitalized Tooth Fairy. Tooth Fairy's castle. And at this point, I believe Mr. Tiatame has gotten onto the wagon and into the Tooth Fairy's realm.
Yes.
Yes.
And he's brought along a band of villainous villains that might help him. So he's got Mr. Brown, who's good at picking locks and seems like a character out of Reservoir Dogs.
I mean, he's a character that could be out of any heist movie ever.
That's true.
He's very much the gentleman's professional, walks away with a cool 10% of anything that he gets on, which I'm not sure what he's going to do with 10% of teeth, but there we are.
He also has somebody who failed out of the Unseen University. He's not a very good wizard, but he can theoretically deal with magic things.
There's Medium Dave, Banjo.
Medium Dave's brother.
Medium Dave and Banjo are brothers. Banjo is very childlike. There's
Chicken Wire.
Chicken Wire and Cat's Eye. No, a Cat's Eye?
That sounds right. They're kind of interchangeable villains.
Yeah, for the most part.
They're red shirt villains.
The only ones that really matter are the two that pick the locks, which is the wizard and Mr. Brown. Though Banjo matters because he is very simplistic. He acts as a child.
He's got some sort of developmental thing such that he has more of a child's intellect and understanding of the world. And he sort of relies on his brother, Medium Dave, to tell him what to do.
And they use Banjo's teeth to get the Tooth Fairy because Banjo still believes in the Tooth Fairy. Which, just wonderful.
So that's how they kidnap Violet.
Yes.
Susan, giving up on old-fashioned police work, figures out where Violet is by kind of cheating a little bit. So she goes back to Death's Castle, where we all have books of our complete lives written down. So she just reads Violet's. And Violet is describing this weird, childlike world where the sky does not go all the way down. So the way a child would draw the world is there's flat green, a space, flat blue, maybe some silly looking trees. Like if you've got a river, there's fish just sort of on top of it that you can see.
Dopey looking house, yeah.
All that stuff. So that's the Tooth Fairy's realm, which Susan recognizes and has Binky take her there. Because Binky can go anywhere, even though Death actually cannot go to the Tooth Fairy's realm.
Well, Death can't. Binky can. Because Binky isn't Death. Death isn't welcome in the Tooth Fairy's realm. No one actually dies there. They just sort of and fade away.
Which is sort of weird and creepy.
Very true. I think Medium Dave gets eaten by a closet at some point. Chicken Wire has something threaten to cut his thumbs off and runs out of the tower.
Yes, and I actually know that now because I have some German friends who were telling me about Der Struwwelpeter, which is this terrifying book of German nursery rhymes about children who misbehave and meet horrible fates in rhyme, and it's illustrated. And one of the characters is this kid who will not stop sucking his thumb. And this man with giant scissors shows up and cuts his thumbs off. It's kind of horrifying. Are German children okay?
Don't look at me. I'm not a German child. I don't know.
I don't think they're okay. I read this as an adult because I only found out about it as an adult. It's very disturbing. But what we're getting at here is that this is a child's place, the Tooth Fairy's realm. So things that children believe in, like the guy that cuts your thumbs off with a pair of scissors, that's going to happen. If you were scared of your closet as a child, which I was.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. No, Chicken Wire was afraid of the thumb guy. It was the eye dude who was afraid of the dark for some reason. But Medium Dave is afraid of a literal wardrobe, like a closet.
That eats him.
And it just eats him.
It's not even a mimic. It's just his childhood fears.
Yeah. You know, because childhood thoughts and everything rule this place. And there's actually a really good reason why, not just because it's a Tooth Fairy, but because of something that's revealed later in the book, which is fantastic. I love it. We'll get to it here in a minute.
Almost there. So Susan arrives at the Tooth Fairy's house, and things have gotten tense amongst the villainous villains with Mr. Tea Time. Because as they're here, they're starting to act in a more childlike fashion. In addition to seeing things that frighten them, they're starting to bicker more like children.
Mhm.
And Mr. Tea Time is just sort of murdering people who are no longer useful.
Yeah, that's pretty much how he rolls. I think the first person to get it is Ernie, and then I believe Mr. Brown. But
I think so.
yeah.
So that's frightening. You can see, even without feeling more childlike and more inclined to argue with each other, like you can be a little bit tense in this situation.
I mean, they are on a job to murder a guy, so
They are.
tensions are probably already high. And then magic gets involved, and weird stuff starts happening. And by weird, we mean even weirder for them, where they have literally a city that is covered in magic with a university that is dedicated to magic, and things are getting weird from that level.
Susan, Binky, Bilious, the oh god of hangovers, who currently isn't hungover, the Death of Rats and the Raven all arrive at the Tooth Fairy's castle.
Mhm.
And at the lowest level of the castle, they find this super creepy, horrible thing. Would you like to describe it?
It's a giant pile of teeth, and I don't mean like a small pile. I mean like this is like several times the height of a man. Because the Tooth Fairy understands one of the powers of magic, which is thaumaturgy. You make a connection from a smaller thing of something to affect the same thing that it came from on a larger scale. And that's why the Tooth Fairy has been collecting teeth. Because thaumaturgy is kind of like voodoo, where you prick a doll with somebody's hair in it, or fingernail cuttings, or teeth, because teeth are a more permanent fixture of a person rather than something that grows out and then is shed. That's why the Tooth Fairy was collecting all these teeth. Because if someone has the teeth of somebody else, they can use magic to compel that person to do and act as they see fit. So, Mr. Titame had Mr. Magic Man, whose name I can't remember,
I can't either. He's not important.
cast a spell to incline everybody to stop believing in the Hogfather, which is why faith in him is collapsing. People are just going, oh, it's just your dad. It's just your dad. It's the story that people tell. And it's causing that space where the Hogfather was, and everything else is coming in, trying to fill into that space, which is where Bilious came from, the Veruca Gnome, the Pencil Eater,
The
other
Sock
stuff like
Eater.
that. Yep. And it's also implied that it made the Tooth Fairy's powers a little stronger to bring out the things that these people believed in a childlike sense, because they're now reverting into children, and it's making that belief stronger, and that's what the Tooth Fairy is using to kill these people.
Was there anything you were particularly frightened of as a child?
Oh God, yes. Well, like, other than just like the concept of death, because I had it introduced to me really early.
Tell me about your childhood fears.
uh, honestly, like, just adults in general, I didn't understand them. There was a lot of like, do as I say, not as I do kind of things. So, like, to me, like, with child's logic, it just didn't make any sense. Like, I was always just trying to figure out where they were coming from and where they were going. So, like, I had a lot of fear of adults. But, like, if you're talking, like, nonsensical child things, for a while, I just desperately believed in the don't step on a crack, you'll break your mother's back. There was more in the fact that, like, I believed in, like, I was wishing bad luck on her, rather than, like, somebody was going to come up and just, like, break her in half. What about you?
So I remember, so in my room as a child, there was a blind that covered the window, as is normal. It was just one sheet of fabric or vinyl or whatever. But at one point, there was a hole in it. And I was absolutely terrified that a burglar was going to come through this tiny hole in the blind. But if I didn't sleep, if I just stared at it without, like, going to sleep, then that would foil the burglars somehow.
Ah, yes. It's like red light, green light. If we can see you, you can't move.
And which is, I mean, clearly ridiculous, but I deeply believed it.
That has actually reminded me of one. I had a bed that was at the same level. It was like a child's bed right before you got, like, the twin bed that you got as, like, not a teenager or whatever, but, like, like you had the crib, the bassinet, whatever, and then you had like a child's bed. Well, this child's bed was at the same height as my window. And like if the window was open, even a crack like that to let like a little bit of air in, I was like, I'm gonna fall out. Oh God. So like my mother and dad would go to sleep, or they would put me to sleep, and I would get up, pull the bed away from the window, and then go back in. But yeah.
Irrational fear of windows.
Yep. I won't sleep with my bed near windows to this day. I just don't like it.
Wow. You know?
I don't think I'm going to fall through or anything, even though my bed is now actually the same height as my windows. Now I'm going to be weird about that, I guess. But
You can be weird about that.
yeah. I'm an adult. I get to be weird about what I want.
Exactly. This is the privilege of being an adult. You can be weird about windows all you want.
Exactly.
Where were we? They found out the teeth, the controlling beliefs. So Susan, who is the inner babysitter, so she does great in a world of children, though she is kind of worried about things because her hair currently is not obeying her, because normally her hair is just perfectly magically fixed. She is what she always wanted to be, which is totally normal, so she doesn't have any of her powers here. But she's still doing pretty good. Again, inner babysitter. So she rescues Violet and the Tooth Fairy girl, and Violet and Bilious immediately start having a little romance. It's quite cute.
Yeah, she's part of the temperance movement, if I remember right, and Bilious is very into that. The god of crocodile, Offler.
Yes.
The god who is a crocodile, for some reason, has a temperance movement. I guess it makes sense. Crocodiles don't drink a lot of alcohol either.
I don't know that they'd object because they're crocodiles.
That's true, but I guess they don't get invited to many parties. So
that's sad. I should invite a crocodile to my next party.
Definitely.
I don't know any crocodiles.
There's some gators down south. We can do that.
It's true. I like gators. In concept. So Susan runs into Mr. Tea Time and actually kind of manages to defeat him. As in, he vanishes at least, because he tries to use the Sword of Death against her, but it doesn't really work because this is not a place where death is a thing. So things manage to work out. She finds the actual Tooth Fairy, capital T Tooth Fairy, who turns out to be an old bogeyman.
Not a bogeyman. The bogeyman. The first of his kind. Because we actually see bogeyman before in the story. But this is like the progenitor. And it's not so much a god, but like the closest thing that bogeymen have. But this one has been watching humanity since the very beginning and changed their conception of them. And especially about the children, because they always fed on children and the belief of children. So they became something different. It changes a big theme in the story as well, in some ways, because they talk about it with the Hogfather as well. But instead of taking fear and inspiring belief like that, they become the Tooth Fairy, which protects the children, which is why everything is so childlike. Because they decide to live for children, and their realm becomes for children. Gosh, I feel like I'm not explaining that well.
I think it works because, yeah, they've turned into this children's realm, and they're keeping the teeth safe.
That is an important point. They never used the teeth.
It's only Mr. Tea Time who used the teeth.
Only Mr. Tea Time. The bogeyman identified the idea that someone could do this, and they were like, no, bad. And they took all the teeth in a way that they could.
And kept them safe. Anyway, the old bogeyman kind of dies. Although things don't really die here. It goes away. And Banjo is the only member of the villainous villains who is still around because he's basically a child. So Susan convinces him to sweep up all the magic teeth stuff so it doesn't work anymore and put things back in order. And basically gives him the job of being the new Tooth Fairy. Because this is a realm where he does well. He's basically a child. His old dog will probably show up any minute now. And he'll be fine. people will help him along. So everything seems to be great. She's disrupted the magic spell. She's rescued Violet. She's installed a new tooth fairy. So she's going to go back to Death's realm, I guess, taking Binky, but runs into Death on the way. And Death takes her to this sort of magical tableau where she watches the Hogfather go through various evolutions of his legend. And she kind of helps him defeat the auditors in the form of various large dogs. So,
well, the Hogfather at that point is a pig.
Yes.
A big feral hog. And
the kind you need assault rifles for.
Yes.
If you have 30 to 50 feral hogs.
No. There's just one. That's why they can chase him down with dogs. So the auditors they have to become part of the legend to kill him because that's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Because stories. So they're chasing him down as animals. But the big flaw in the auditors, is you can see in part of the books, is that they don't act alone. They aren't individuals. And Death uses this to defeat them. After Susan holds them at bay for a while, they become too invested in the form of the hounds. And Death is talking about how life gets inside you and it changes you. Life is something that you experience, that it changes who you were to something else. And that is kind of how life works the entire time. The auditors don't change. That's the whole point. They are as a unit, they don't change. And so those auditors have been exposed to life, and it starts to change them and give them ideas and everything like that. And it makes them alive. And Death comes for everything that's alive eventually. And Death uses that to defeat them, if I remember correctly.
That sounds right. So everything should be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the Tooth Fairy spell has been disrupted, and we've got a new Tooth Fairy. Tea Time's been vanquished. The Auditors have been vanquished, and the Hogfather's been rescued. He reclaims his sled from Death, throws out the fake beard, and goes off to make his rounds. So Death's going to just go drop Susan off at the house where she governesses small children.
Well, they have a fight at that point, Susan and Death. Susan was like, why did we have to do this? Would it have changed anything? And Death says something about the sun. He said the sun wouldn't have rose. And she said, what would have happened instead? He said a giant ball of gas would have been circling the planet and come across the horizon, providing light and everything like that. And she goes, oh, you're just being, clever with words, that the belief in the Hogfather and everything didn't really matter. And he goes, well, of course it matters. There's a very famous quote that I believe you're about to read now.
Humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape. Tooth fairies? Hogfathers? Little? Yes, as practice. You have to start out learning to believe the little lies. So we can believe the big ones? Yes, justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing. But they're not the same at all. You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy, and yet, Death waved a hand, and yet you act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some rightness in the universe by which it may be judged. Well, yes, but people have got to believe that, or what's the point? My point exactly. And this is actually something that also comes up a lot in the Watch series, this idea about justice and mercy and trying stuff that we want and that we're trying to get. Sam Vimes at one point, when he's going back in time to rescue the Watch, basically, when he's asked what he wants out of revolution, he says, a hard-boiled egg. I don't think I can get justice, probably not mercy, but I can probably get a hard-boiled egg.
Well, there's another book that I've read that also talks about this, but it puts it more succinctly, is that we have to believe in these things, otherwise they will never be. So basically, I love the Hogfather because it talks about the idea of belief, and it talks about the idea of we have to believe in things and we have to practice believing in things even when, it's hard, because we have to have that practice to have our beliefs hold up when it's the important things like truth, justice, mercy. And, you know, it's important to remember the world as it is, but it's also important to remember the world as we want it to be, because otherwise it never will be.
I deeply believe, as the UN Declaration of Human Rights starts, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, despite a certain amount of evidence to the contrary. So yeah, that's a big lie that I need practice believing.
Yeah, I think we could all use a little practice believing stuff like that, especially nowadays. I don't want to get political or anything, but there are lots of people nowadays that like to treat even their neighbors as other, and you just can't do that. You have to believe in mercy and justice and equality, or otherwise things just fall apart.
They do. All right, there's going to be one more thing, because Terry Pratchett loves tropes and will bring up tropes and put hats on them and point them out. So in every heist or superhero movie we've ever seen, we think everything's fine, but oh wait, there's a twist. The villain has somehow traveled straight through a plot hole and gotten back to the hero's home and is waiting for them. Again, I think they're just traveling through plot holes when they do this.
Well, the idea so far is that when somebody disappears in the Tooth Fairy's realm, they end up somewhere in Ankh-Morpork to die. So that they don't die in the Tooth Fairy's realm, but they die outside. And Tiatame, or Tea Time, falls into the Unseen University, who then save him.
Unfortunately.
Because of course they do. This man's in distress. They have no idea what's going on. So I don't blame them for that. But they do just let him go.
So he goes back to Susan's house and is waiting there with the Sword of Death that Susan took to the Tooth Fairy's castle with her, because why not?
Mm-hmm.
And so when Death and Susan show up, he's going to attack and kill Death, because he's got the sword that can actually kill Death.
He thinks.
Yes. I'm not sure that's actually going to work.
Yeah, they never say if it would work or not, but knowing Terry Pratchett, it's a 50-50.
Susan, however, being the inner babysitter that she is, takes the poker that she slays monsters with, throws it straight through Death, and it impales and kills Tea Time. And the way this is explained is this poker only kills monsters.
Because that's the way it works, because of belief. And because there's more belief sloshing around right now, it spills over into the poker, and Death isn't a monster, but Tea Time definitely is. So it goes through Death and it hits Tea Time.
He's a monster. So now we've vanquished everything, and now everything's going to be okay. The sun will rise, and Hogswatch will continue, not quite as usual, but maybe a little better than usual, because one thing I really liked is that Death takes the time to save people like the little match girl freezing in the snow.
I think he delighted in that one quite a lot. And honestly, I delighted reading it, because Death never gets to help anyone. That's not true. He never gets to save anyone. There is a point in one of the books that he calls himself like the final release. And I think he's talking about like people in dire situations and that sort of thing. But like little matchstick girls don't need a release. They just need like help. And that's what he finally got to do, is he got to help. I think Albert, his butler, says something along the lines of like, Death doesn't save people. And he's like, tonight I'm not Death. Tonight I'm the Hogfather.
He's substituting, and he gets to have fun. I like watching Death have fun.
Very true. I like when he stole everything in the fancy restaurant and replaced it with mud and boots, and then gave the fancy stuff to the what's it called? The group of
the beggars.
Foul Old Ron,
the Duck Man,
which is the one that keeps saying, that's Foul Old Ron, Millennium Hand and Shrimp. Love him.
What I even love more is that at the fancy restaurant, they decided to just start cooking up all the shoes, and people loved it. Terry Pratchett loves making fun of fancy restaurants.
He does.
And I kind of love it. I even like fancy restaurants, and I kind of love it.
Oh, yeah.
So the time has come to rate this on the sugar scale. So S stands for sexiness, which not really. Terry Pratchett doesn't really do sexy.
Not at all. The one thing that I do have to point out is that there are two main ships for this book, and that's Bilious and Violet. That one's obvious.
Obvious.
The other one that people like to go off of is Titame and Susan.
What? No.
No, it's terrible.
No.
In the book, it's very obvious there is no connection to them. But because of the miniseries and people misattributing, like excitement and fear as arousal because, their cheeks are flushed because they're angry and they're breathing hard because everything's intense. Their eyes are dilated because things are intense and people are like, they're turned on. No, they hate each other. Stop it with that ship.
Yeah, no, I am not okay with that.
No.
The U stands for uniqueness, which I judge in units of platypi, because that's a pretty unique animal. This is a pretty unique book.
It is. Besides other Terry Pratchett novels, I've never really read anything quite like it. The closest I'd have to say is probably an Xanth novel. But even then, Xanth is a little more serious than Terry Pratchett.
I'm trying to remember. It's been a very long time since I read Xanth.
It's been like 7th grade for me, but...
About the same. But it does have that kind of optimism, I think, with fairy tales. This is, even amongst Terry Pratchett books, this is one of my favorites because it's so optimistic.
It really is. Not only that, but it's a really good standalone. If you're thinking about reading Terry Pratchett, this is probably the place to start because it introduces you really well to the world and to a lot of other characters without giving too much away, other than the death saga, because then you know what's going on with Mort and everything. But even then, it really doesn't because the Discworld timeline is like several thousand years in all the books. So
I mean, it's death. He's always been there.
True.
He always will be there.
Exactly.
Time gets a little squirrely when death is involved.
Time gets a little squirrely in Discworld anyways.
It does. So the G stands for gender. This book does pass the Bechdel test, so it's better than some Terry Pratchett's in that regard. Because especially with The Watch, sometimes there's not really women. But we've got Susan, we've got Violet. We do address the fact that the Unseen University prohibits women. We have Twyla, who is one of the kids that Susan governesses for.
The one with the almost lethal speech impediment, yeah.
Yes. Well, she doesn't really have a speech impediment. She's just using it to be cute.
Oh, what is it that she said? Hold on, I have that note written down here. What have I told you about trying to sound irritatingly cute, Twyla? She said. The little girl said, "You said I mustn't, that the exaggerated lisping is a hanging offense and I only do it to get attention." That's the other thing I love about Terry Pratchett is just the quotable quotes. Just fantastic. I have a couple more in here that I might share at the end to, just...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very quotable quotes. So, yeah, there's a lot better representation of women. They're good characters. I love Susan. She's one of my favorite characters in the Discworld. She's great.
She is probably one of the better written female protagonists that Terry Pratchett does. Monstrous Regiment is probably better. Definitely better. However, like you said, there is The Watch where like the only female character in that really... that I can think of off the top of my head is Aguna, and everything she does is wound up in
she's a werewolf,
like society, werewolf and a woman, and it's very interesting for a while, but after like the 4th book of it, you get very tired of it.
There's also Vime's wife, but a lot of times just shows up to fuss at Vimes, which isn't great.
She's Vimes' foil, and though Vimes is probably my favorite character, she's probably one of my least favorite things about the books.
Yeah, I want to like her, but I don't really.
I feel like I would love her as a person, but as a character, I feel like she could be more interesting.
Yeah, same. So this one's pretty good on gender.
Mm-hmm.
A is the weird one. It stands for axiness because Franz Kafka says that a book should be an axe for the frozen sea inside us, which I love.
That sounds like a great quote. What does it mean?
How much? Well, the way I interpret it is how much does this book make you think about, think about life in a new way? Does it bother you emotionally? Does it disturb you? Does it make you feel strong emotions?
So the main principle of art, it's supposed to make you feel something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that quote. I'm going to steal that.
Please. I love that quote from Franz Kafka.
The first couple of times I've read it, yes, because there were new things that came over it. Is it the most blunt instrument or the most subtle instrument that I've ever read regarding emotion? No.
Is Terry Pratchett subtle about his points?
God, no. But the thing is that it's a widely accessible point, and I think it's a good jumping off point. So would I call it like a grand masterwork of that sort of thing? No, but it is probably the most accessible version of what he's giving to people. So I wouldn't say it's like the Frogwa of, hot takes. But then again, not everybody wants goose liver. And
he had foie gras not too long ago.
Is good.
Yeah,
but it's not for everyone.
I didn't expect to like it, but I did.
But I feel like this is something that could appeal to many, many people and get many, many people thinking, which is its strong point. So, like I was saying, is it the blunt wedge or like the tip of the spear? No, but it is something that anybody can take part in.
For me, it reminds me to be optimistic, which I'm not a very optimistic person. But, death believes in us.
And if he can believe in us, we can believe in ourselves.
We can definitely believe in ourselves. Finally, we've got readability. So Terry Pratchett doesn't have chapters, and it's very easy to read. It's fun to read. There's just something funny. I mean, there's all these deep things about belief, but there's always something funny to keep you going.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Terry Pratchett is famous for his annotations. He will make little stars in his book, or asterisks, that's it. And at the bottom, there will be little footnotes, and those are fantastic. The one thing I both love and hate about his style is its very flowing train of thought. There's no like smash cut as there would be like in a movie where there's the end of the chapter and then it moves to another point of view. Sometimes it will change point of view like in the middle of a paragraph. And if you aren't ready for that the first time that you're reading it, it's very disorienting. I did have trouble the first time I read Terry Pratchett because of that. But once I got used to it, I find that I prefer it.
It's very fun to read. It's easy to read. It's just a pleasant experience to read.
All around.
Now, you said you had some quotes that you wanted to read.
I do. These are just from Hogfather. Now, I'm bad about staying on track. So when I started reading Hogfather, I was highlighting things and screenshotting them so that we could talk about them. And then in the middle, I kind of stopped. And then I started doing it again at the end. But there are a few that I think are fantastic. Terry Pratchett has a thing in here about a philosopher that he made up. Didactylus has summed up an alternative hypothesis as things just happen. What the hell? I love that. Getting an education was a bit like getting a communicable sexual disease and made you unsuitable for a lot of jobs, and then you had the urge to pass it on. Children had to watch that. Educational. The world will teach them about monsters soon enough. Let them remember there's always the poker. But they saw a human. I think they had a very good idea of what he was.
Children can be very smart about that.
Mm-hmm. there was also that bit in there that I talked about where he said that the sword was educational. I meant to get that one.
Swords are
I forgot
educational.
that. But yeah, Terry Pratchett has very good little snippets that are fun to just remember and go off. What was the one about ecological vandalism that nobody asked questions? She said something about, and then Jack cut down the beanstalk, adding ecological vandalism to the already aforementioned counts of theft and murder, which no one called him out on because things don't happen like that when inconvenient things don't happen like that when you're a hero. Nobody asks questions, and that's not a quote. But I saw that, I was like, oh my god, I love it.
I'll look it up and add it under the screen. Well, Duke, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything you would like to tell our readers to do?
Read more. It's fantastic. Support your local libraries. They're fantastic as well, and they don't get enough support.
And the more you use their resources, the more funding they get, because that's how library funding works.
That is very true.
It's very usage-based. And would you like to tell our readers where they can find you on Twitch?
I am the Mad Duke Plays, all one word. I stream irregularly, but I'm always happy to see people, and I'm always happy to entertain. So if you found this entertaining, come watch me play survival games with cat ears on. It's basically just silly nonsense that I play with my cat.
And you can use points to make him stop what he is doing and tell the cat she's a pretty cat.
That's very true. Arya would appreciate that.
Thank you all for listening. Like and subscribe.